Vivid verses.
The voicemail from Corinne ran 43 seconds. I know, because I played it twice, both times standing in the kitchen with my coffee going cold, watching condensation trace lines down the window glass while she explained that she'd been thinking about me, that it had been too long, that some of the old mutual friends had mentioned I was doing well, and she was just so happy for me and would love to catch up if I had any interest. 43 seconds. She hadn't used that many consecutive words about me in the last decade of our marriage. I deleted it and finished the coffee. That would have been the end of it, except for Bria. She called 3 days later on a Thursday evening when I was reviewing a contractor bid at my kitchen table with my reading glasses on and a takeout container of Thai food cooling beside me. I didn't recognize the number immediately. She'd changed it at some point in the intervening years, but something about the area code made me pick up instead of letting it roll to voicemail. "Dad," she said it the way people say a word they've been rehearsing. Warm but controlled. The warmth engineered. "Here we go." I set down the bid packet and took off my glasses. "Bria, I wasn't sure you'd answer." A pause calibrated for vulnerability. "I'm really glad you did. I didn't say anything. Silence is information too, and I've learned to let people fill it. I've been meaning to call for a while," she continued. It's been hard to know what to say. But I heard you've been doing really well with everything, and I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you, that I think about you." I looked at the contractor bid without seeing it. She heard I've been doing really well. That's the sentence that mattered. Not the pride, not the thinking about me, the heard. Someone had told her something specific enough that she'd picked up the phone after years of silence. "That's kind of you," I said. My voice was even because there was nothing to be uneven about. This was simply data. "I mean it, Dad. I know things were—" She paused again. "I know we haven't talked, and I know some of that is on me. Some." I noticed the word without commenting on it. "I'm just calling because I miss you," she said. "And because Mom mentioned she'd reached out, and I thought maybe I should too." There it was. Mom mentioned she'd reached out. They were coordinating. Two separate approaches, designed to look organic, spread out over days, so it felt like separate impulses rather than a strategy session. How much do they think I've changed? I'd spent enough years sitting across from people in negotiations to recognize a flanking move. Come at the target from multiple directions. Make each approach seem independent. Create the impression of a groundswell rather than a campaign. "I appreciate the call," I said. "How are you doing?" She talked for a while after that. She was well, mostly. Living in a different part of the state now, new apartment, new job she was working her way into. She was careful not to ask me directly about money or property, which told me they weren't ready to make that move yet. This was still the warmth phase. The reestablishing contact phase. You don't ask for the loan until you've reminded the person they like you. I listened. I answered her questions. I was pleasant because there was no reason to be otherwise, and because unpleasantness would give her something to work with, a grievance to circle back to, a crack to wedge open. Pleasantness gave her nothing. When she said goodbye, she said she hoped we could do this again. I said I hoped she had a good rest of her week. I put the phone down and stared at the contractor bid for a minute without reading it. Then I picked up my glasses, put them back on, and went back to work. The mutual friend was a man named Porter, who I'd known for almost 30 years, and who had the particular gift of believing himself to be a neutral party in every situation he'd ever inserted himself into. He called on a Friday, which was his tell. Porter saved his sensitive conversations for Fridays because he'd read somewhere that people were more agreeable at the end of the work week. "Just checking in," he said. "You never just check in, Porter." He laughed a little too long. "You know me too well." "I do. I was talking to Corinne last week," he said. "She asked about you." She seems, I don't know, reflective. She asked me to ask you if you'd be open to a conversation." I was standing on my back patio, watching the light change over the yard. I'd put in a good fence last spring, cedar, and it had turned a gray-silver color in the weather that I liked more than I'd expected. The garden was overgrown in a way I meant to address and kept not addressing. "Porter," I said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to give me a straight answer." "Of course." "Did she tell you what she wants to talk to me about?" "A beat. Not specifically, but you have a sense." "I think she wants to reconnect. Maybe address some things." "Do you know about the property on Harwick Road?" Silence. "I bought it about 18 months ago," I said. "Commercial parcel. It's done reasonably well." "You mentioned it to her." "She may have. I think it came up in conversation, yes." "I think it came up." He'd told her. He'd either told her directly or he'd mentioned it in that particular way people mention things when they want them mentioned offhandedly, with just enough detail to register. Porter had always thought of himself as a bridge builder. What he'd actually spent 30 years doing was carrying messages between people who hadn't asked him to. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said. "I'm going to pass on the conversation. She's really changed, you know. People, Porter, can surprise you." "Porter, stop." He stopped. "I don't need you to carry anything back," I said. "Not to her, not to Bria. Just tell them you called, and I was doing well. That's all. You can't just—" "I can. I'm doing it." I paused. "We still on for golf next month?" Another pause, recalibrating. Yeah, of course." "Good. I'll see you then." The letter from the attorney arrived on a Tuesday. Not an aggressive letter. Nothing demanding, nothing with legal language designed to intimidate. More of an exploratory letter, the kind that announces itself as reasonable before it makes an unreasonable request. The attorney's name was Halloran, and the letter explained that his client, Corinne, was hoping to open a dialogue regarding certain estate planning matters and family financial arrangements that she believed would benefit from conversation. Estate planning. There it was. The flanking had failed. Now they were moving to the direct approach. I sat with the letter for a few minutes at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd taken Bria's call. Outside, the morning light was doing something nice with the garden, hitting the overgrown patch near the back fence where the hostess had gone slightly wild. I've been meaning to deal with that for 2 summers. She's found a lawyer. I thought about what that meant. Not the legal mechanics of it. I understood the legal mechanics. I'd spent months understanding them after the divorce, sitting with my own attorney who explained, with the patient precision of someone delivering bad news for a living, exactly what the custody arrangement and support terms meant in practical terms. I understood the difference between what a court had ordered and what a court could order, and I had a very clear picture of what assets were mine, how they were structured, and what an attorney making inquiries about estate planning could and couldn't compel. No, what interested me was the sequence. The voicemail, the call from Bria, the message through Porter, and now the formal letter. They'd escalated through each channel without success and reached the legal approach. That was a decision that required either genuine desperation or the conviction that I was still the person they'd known. Someone who, faced with enough pressure from enough directions, would eventually fold. They don't know what I became. That was the thing about rebuilding quietly. Nobody sees the person you turn into. They last knew you at your lowest point, at the wreckage, and they file you there in their memory. They expect to find you there when they come back. The idea that you might have become someone entirely different in the interval, someone with a different architecture entirely, that doesn't compute for them. I went to my desk and called my attorney, a precise woman named Kathleen, who I'd been working with for years and who I valued above almost all my other professional relationships for her ability to understand what I needed without requiring extensive explanation. "I got a letter from an attorney named Halloran," I said, "on behalf of my ex-wife." "What's the ask?" "Couched as a request for dialogue about estate planning and family financial arrangements." A pause. That soft language for an inquiry into assets. That was my read. "Do you want to respond?" "I want you to respond," I said, politely, briefly, something that makes clear there's nothing to discuss and closes the door on further correspondence. That I can do. Don't be aggressive, I said. I don't want aggression. I want it to be so matter of fact that it doesn't give them anything to push against. Understood. Give me a day. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went back to the kitchen, poured another cup of coffee, and looked at the garden again. I should explain something about the courtroom, because without it the shape of what followed won't make sense. It was a Thursday, mid-morning, the light coming flat through the high windows of the family court building. I'd sat in enough rooms in my life that I thought I understood how rooms worked, the way they could feel neutral or charged, the way certain furniture arrangements implied certain power dynamics. I thought I understood how to read a room. I hadn't understood what it would feel like to watch my daughter cry on a witness stand and describe a father I didn't recognize. She was 15. Her voice broke at exactly the right moments. She said I'd missed birthdays I hadn't missed and forgotten conversations I remembered in detail. She said I'd chosen work over her, that I'd been distant since she was small, that she'd grown up feeling like a burden. What do you do with that? What tool do you reach for when your own child is the instrument of your dismantling? I sat at the table next to my attorney and kept my face still. I made notes on a legal pad. I passed the notes to my attorney, and she read them with her reading glasses perched low and nodded or shook her head. I was methodical, and I was controlled because coming apart in a courtroom helps nothing and helps no one. And because I already knew before the testimony ended that the question wasn't whether I would lose, but how much. The answer was enough. The custody arrangement was not what I'd asked for. The support terms were not what anyone impartial would have called fair. Corinne walked out of that courthouse looking like someone who had won something and was trying to be gracious about it. I walked out looking at the sidewalk. I didn't look back at either of them. Not because I was performing something I had no audience I cared about, but because looking back implied a future moment of return, and I had already decided, somewhere in the previous hour, that the return would never come. They've burned the bridge. They may not know they've burned it, but it's ash. What I did over the subsequent years is not a dramatic story. I worked. I learned things I hadn't known I needed to learn. I sat with discomfort until it became neutral information. I made decisions carefully and consistently and let time do the mathematics. The wealth that accumulated was not luck. Luck played a small part, but mostly it was the result of a man who had been given a reason to develop a very clear relationship with what mattered and what didn't. I didn't bother being bitter. Bitter is expensive. It requires constant maintenance, and it corrodes the container. I was simply done. The call I hadn't expected came from Bria's number on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks after the attorney's letter. I was between meetings, standing in the small break room of the building where I kept an office, and I answered it partly out of momentum and partly because I was curious what phase they'd moved to. It wasn't Bria. It was Corinne. I know it's not my number showing, she said immediately. She let me use her phone. I figured you might not answer mine. Correct. Hello, Corinne. I'm not calling through a lawyer, she said. I wanted to talk to you myself. Her voice was familiar in the way that old furniture is familiar. You recognize the shape of it. You remember a time when that shape meant something. The recognition is involuntary. The feeling attached to it is not. I'm listening, I said. I know you got Halloran's letter. I know what it looked like. I want you to know that wasn't. I didn't mean for it to come across the way I think it came across. How did you mean for it to come across? A pause. I just wanted to start a conversation. About us, about Bria, about... There are things I regret, you know? Things that I think about. And I thought maybe you'd want to. Corinne, address them. Talk through them. Corinne. My voice was flat, not cold. Just flat. A level surface with nothing on it. I'd like to ask you a question. Okay. Why now? Silence. You've had years, I said. I wasn't hard to find. You could have called. You could have written. You knew where I was. Why now? I told you. I know what you told me. I'm asking what changed. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, something had shifted in her voice. A hairline fracture in the warmth. People change, she said. People grow. I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm sure you have. That sounds like you don't believe me. I believe you've done some work, I said. Most people do, eventually. What I don't believe is that the work happened to coincide with you learning I'd bought a commercial property. The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences. Not the strategic kind. The caught kind. That's not fair. I'm not interested in fair, I said. I'm interested in accurate. Those aren't always the same thing. You're still angry. Am I? I checked. The way you check when someone asks if you have a headache. A quick internal survey. No. What I felt was something else, something quieter. The particular equanimity of a person who has already made their decision and is simply watching events confirm it. I'm not angry, I said. I want to be clear about that. You'd be surprised how not angry I am. But I also want to be clear that there's nothing to discuss. Not the estate, not the money, not the old grievances. Nothing. Bria is an adult. She's still your daughter. She's an adult who made choices, I said. Some of those choices affected me significantly. She was old enough to know what she was doing. I don't hold that against her the way you might expect. I've spent a long time getting to a place where I don't hold much against anyone. But I also don't owe her a relationship she hasn't asked for in any honest way. She has asked. She called you. She called me after you reached out through Porter, and Porter reached out to me. She called me after you found a lawyer. She called because you coordinated. I'm not criticizing the coordination. It makes sense from your perspective. But don't tell me she asked in any honest way, because she didn't. A longer silence. I waited it out. Break room sounds. The hum of the refrigerator. Someone walking past in the hallway. I'm sorry, Corinne said at last. For what happened? In the courtroom. I want you to know that. I looked at the break room refrigerator. Someone had stuck a note to it about labeling your food. The note was starting to peel at one corner. She's sorry. The word landing where she'd aimed it, expecting something to shift in response. A door to open. A posture to soften. I hear that, I said. That's it. That's all I get. What would you like? I'd like you to, I don't know. Say something. Tell me it means something to you. I thought about it honestly. Does it mean something? A woman I'd built a life with, calling from her daughter's phone because she'd correctly calculated I wouldn't pick up if I saw her number, telling me she was sorry about a courtroom where I'd watched my own daughter dismantle the record of our relationship with practiced, tearful precision. It meant something, just not what she was hoping for. It doesn't change anything, I said. An apology is a statement. It doesn't reopen what's closed. How can you be so cold about this? I'm not cold, I said and meant it. Cold is the absence of something. I'm just clear. 2 weeks passed quietly. I worked. I had dinner with a friend named George who lived across town and who I'd known since before the marriage, and who had the virtue of never mentioning Corinne unless I brought her up first. I read 3 books I'd been meaning to get to for months. I addressed the overgrown section of the garden, finally pulling out what had gone to seed and deciding what to replant. Then Bria called from her own number. I let it ring twice before answering. Not hesitation, just the small pause of a man deciding how he wants to enter a room. Dad, hey Bria, Mom told me you talked. Her voice was different from the first call. Less rehearsed. Something rawer underneath it. We did. She said it didn't go well. I think it went the way it was going to go. A pause. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are you ever going to forgive us? Forgive. I turned the word over for a moment. That's an interesting question, I said. Because forgiveness is something I think about differently than most people. I don't think of it as a door that opens. I think of it as, I stop, tried again. I'm not angry. I haven't been angry in a long time. If that's what forgiveness means to you, then maybe I've already done it. But you won't talk to us. You won't let us back in. No, then it's not real forgiveness. Maybe not, I said, but I don't owe you access to my life as proof of anything. Forgiveness, whatever it is mine. It's internal. It doesn't require I hand you a key. We're your family. You were. Silence. A long one. When she spoke again, her voice had changed again, not to the rehearsed warmth of the first call, but to something more genuine. Younger almost, like a sound from further back. I was 15, she said. I was doing what Mom asked me to do. I was a kid. Something in me stilled. There it is. The real sentence. The one underneath everything else, the thing she'd been carrying. Whether it was fully true or only partially true, whether she'd had more agency than she was claiming, that wasn't what mattered about the sentence. What mattered was that she'd said it. I was quiet for a moment. I know you were 15, I said. Does it matter? It matters to how I understand what happened. It doesn't change where I am now. That's not. She stopped. Start again. I can't fix it if you won't let me try. You're right, I said simply. You can't. So that's it. That's it. I could hear her breathing. The particular quality of someone trying not to cry, or try not cry. Hard to tell the difference from the sound alone. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I want you to understand that. This isn't about punishment. There's no punishment intended and none I particularly need. This is where I am. This is who I am now. And that person doesn't have a space in his life for people who appear when it's convenient. It's not convenient, she said, the rawness fully present now. I've been thinking about this for years. I believe you, I said. And I did, in the way you can believe something and also understand that it doesn't change the arithmetic. We could have dinner. Once. Just to see. Bria. Once. I'd sit across from you, and it would be polite, I said. And you'd leave thinking maybe there was hope, and then I'd continue the way I'm continuing. I'm not going to give you the dinner. It wouldn't be honest. Another long silence. Is this really who you want to be? She asked. I looked out the window of my office. Late afternoon light, long and slanted, doing something interesting with the buildings across the street. Yes, I said. This is exactly who I want to be. The final call was from Halloran, the attorney, which meant Corinne hadn't given up on the legal approach. He was smoother on the phone than his letter had suggested. Professional, calibrated, the particular ease of a man who does difficult things on other people's behalf for a living. I appreciate you taking my call, he said. My attorney suggested I hear you out once. That's all I'm asking for. He paused. My client believes she may have legal standing to contest certain asset distributions as they relate to ongoing support obligations. I want to be straightforward with you. I advised her that this was not a strong position, but she asked me to reach out directly as a courtesy before she decided how to proceed. A courtesy. I had to credit the framing. It was good. It turned a threat into a gift. We could come at you legally, but out of generosity, we're calling first. The implication being that I should respond to this generosity with generosity of my own. Some opening, some conversation, some small concession that would give her something to work with. Mr. Halloran, I said, I appreciate the courtesy. My attorney will be reaching back out to yours. Of course. Though, forgive me, there's often a cost to allowing these things to go fully into legal channels. There is, I said agreeably. I found it to be worth it. A pause. I see. Is there anything else? I don't think so. Good. Thank you for your time. I hung up and dialed Kathleen. Halloran called, I said when she answered. What did he say? He suggested Corinne might have grounds to contest some asset distributions. He was fuzzy on specifics, mostly a soft probe. Do you want her to reach out? Yes. Make it brief. Make it bored. A small sound that might have been a laugh. Bored I can do. And Kathleen, yes. Whatever it costs, I'm fine with it. I want them to understand that the cost doesn't move me. A pause. Understood. After I hung up, I sat for a moment in the quiet of my office. The late afternoon light had gone now, the sky through the window settling into that particular blue that comes just before it goes dark, the last color before evening. I thought about what it would look like from the outside, this series of refusals, this closed door. I knew how it would read to people who hadn't been in the courtroom. Bitterness, stubbornness, a man who couldn't let go. They would be wrong about all three, but the wrongness wasn't my problem. I thought about Bria saying I was 15, the realness of it, the things she'd carried and put down, finally, in front of me. I didn't doubt the carrying. I didn't doubt that somewhere in there was the actual girl, the one who'd existed before the strategy sessions, before the coaching, the one who'd stood in my kitchen at 9 years old and show me a drawing of a horse she'd done at school and been proud of in the specific way children are proud when they've made something real. I missed that girl. I had missed her for a long time, but I didn't miss the person who'd sat on that witness stand. And the adult woman who was calling now. I had no way of knowing which one she'd become, and I had no more appetite for finding out. That's the calculation. Not punishment, not bitterness, just the clear-eyed understanding that some costs compound over time, and that the cost of letting them back and was one I'd already paid once at a price I hadn't finished paying for years. I put on my jacket and went downstairs. Outside, the street was doing its evening thing. People coming home, lights going on in windows, the particular texture of a weekday folding into night. I walked to the Thai place 3 blocks east and ordered the same thing I always ordered and ate it at a table by the window, watching the street. My phone sat face down on the table beside my food. Dark screen, no notifications. I didn't think about Corinne. I didn't think about Bria or Porter or Halloran or the courtroom or the cedar fence or the hostage that had finally been dealt with. I thought about the contractor bid from a few weeks back, which I still hadn't made a final decision on. I thought about a book I'd started that morning and was genuinely enjoying. I thought about calling George to confirm golf next Saturday. The food was good. The light in the restaurant was warm. I paid my bill and walked home in the cool of the early evening, hands in my pockets, and when I got back to the house, I turned on the lights in the kitchen and made a cup of tea and sat with the contractor bid for an hour and made my decision. Simple, clean, everything in its right place.
Thanks for listening.